lease on life from it. But in any case, I wanted to start off today with a pretty simple question, which is, who are you? Tell me about yourselves. What do you do? We have just shout it out. Where are you from? Bits and bobs. Who are you?
I'm from Reno, Naval Science Academy. My name is Michael. I'm a personal trainer, and
sick.
I've been doing HEMA for about 9 years now.
Cool. Reno, pretty close. Also hot. Personal trainer. Who else? Who are you?
Dean, I'm from I live in LA, originally from Philly, but I've been here for a long time.
Sick.
You know, I work in tech, I do HEMA, and I have kids.
Dope.
I don't have time for much else.
There you go. That's about right. Who else are you?
I'm Zach. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I'm also in tech, and I teach HEMA. I've been doing it for about a decade.
Yeah. Who are you?
I'm Terry. I'm deaf, and I'm a scientist.
Oh, dope.
And I'm a clinical lab scientist.
Oh, what specialty?
Microbiology.
Oh, cool.
And infectious disease.
Sick. Who are you?
I'm Aiden.
Hi, Aiden. Tell me about yourself.
I've been doing HEMA for about 6 months in a Meyer-focused group.
Sick as. 6 months and you're here. 9 years, 6 months.
Oh, 2 years.
2 years. And I need one in the back.
My name's Adrian. I'm from LA originally, but now I live in San Diego. I train primarily Chinese swordsmanship.
Oh, sick.
And for about 5 months now. And yeah.
So in this room, we have a pretty diverse crew. We've got experience levels, wildly different jobs. If you go out into the main hall and spin around, you see different languages, people from out of the country. There's a really diverse group of folks here at the biggest US tournament in the world. And the same was true back then. Over the course of kind of Meyer's life and before and after this pretty big range, you had 613 people requesting to hold Fecht School, these kind of fencing events, these public gatherings where people would come together and test each other, but also just fight and party and get some prize money. This is how many people applied to hold them, which if you then expand that to the people doing it, it was not niche. Like here, we're in a really small scene of lots of sword nerds, and this is a huge gathering. It's really exciting. But everybody fenced back then, especially in Meyer's time. It was a pastime. It was training for actual stuff. You were required to own arms and armor as a citizen of a city. And so you got on watch duty as a part of your being a citizen. So you had to have it. And lots of folks did this. There's kids who fought with dusaks. I found records as young as 7 people were fencing. It was really, really common. And today we go, oh yeah, it's niche. And when we think of the fencing masters, we can kind of narrow down to these small figures. But this was super, super, super prevalent. And they were also professionals, fathers, young, old, new, experienced. That diversity we see out there in the fencing hall here is the same back then as well. And so, oh yeah, and they were pretty young. This is one thing that's a little bit different. I just published an article on this. The average age of a lot of these fencing masters around Meyer's time was about 23. So it was a pretty young sport, which for a lot of us, we might kind of go like, that seems a little bit odd. But when you're starting at 7, you might have been doing it for over a decade by the time you're 23, and you have a little bit of gumption under your belt. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to talk about Fechtmeisters on the Upper Rhine. Some of these people that might be out in the fencing hall if they were here today, and learning more about them and their lives so we can kind of think of them more. My name's Liam. I run a blog called Evergreen Historical Fencing. Oh, the laser pointer doesn't kill me. I've been doing this for just about 10 years. This summer will be my decade mark. I work at a cancer center doing education. I teach people how to use their software. So like, yeah, we're all diverse. I'm from Seattle. So we're from all over the place, including me. And exploring the lives of some of these like other people. We're going to talk about Meyer too, but folks who aren't the book publishers or the RDLs from the last lecture. It's just Billy who's out there fencing. We can get a better sense of the people who was doing it so that we can kind of picture ourselves then as well. The hall there isn't so different from the hall then because they also had lives, just like we do. So we got some of this about what we do for a living. Personal trainers, scientists, somebody who didn't share. What do you do for a living?
I'm an attorney.
Oh, hell yeah. JD? Fuck yeah. What else? What do you do for a living? Oh, please, both of you.
I do facilities at middle school.
Hell yeah. And for yourself?
I used to be a analyst in the military. I've been between jobs since getting out.
Cool. I taught high school for a few years, so I'm very... So these folks were also people with careers and jobs. Some of the names that you might know, like Joachim Meyer was a cutler or Messerschmitt. Some of these other folks you might not know, but everybody had a career. Part of being a citizen was that you had a profession as an artisan or craftsman. And when you see the records of these folks fencing, it'll often say like Weigenbrack, tailor and fencing master, Hans Grossman, tinsmith and fencing master. The job title was included over and over and over again because these folks were part of guilds in their cities and their profession tended to come first. You would follow a traditional career pathway when you were kind of getting up to this point. Apprentice as a youth, as a journeyman, you would literally be a journeyman on your vaults and you would travel around the Holy Roman Empire being a apprentice with different masters in your trade until you'd eventually get citizenship somewhere and become part of a guild. And then that's kind of, these two kind of go together for mastership and being part of a guild. And for almost every single one of them, fencing was a side hustle. Same as today. Like, can you name anyone who does fencing in HEMA as their #1 full-time gig?
I can think of less.
My teacher, he runs the company spots it.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Like I think Keith Scott O'Reilly does it full time.
Yeah. Keith Cotter Riley, Martin Fabian. What's the name of your teacher?
Michael Forrest.
Okay, yeah, Michael Forrest. You have all of these folks where fencing was not the way they were making their money. And this is actually seen in a couple of records. Weigenbrack, when he was a tailor, he asks to be allowed to hold a fecht school so he can make rent. When they held these events, the person who was putting it on could charge admission, which was restricted usually to a penny a head. But this comes up a few times of folks being like, yeah, they've got their day job and then they do this and just to get a little bit of extra cash on hand. And in 1575, he was requesting them over and over and over again. He had done 4 by the summer. And the council said, you gotta stop. This is too much. And as his reasoning, he said, well, I can't get by. I've been sick. I'm not tailoring. I can't make by. So I'm trying to bring in some money from fencing to try and pad his income. They eventually gave him a little bit of a desk job as a gimme. Said he'd like stop fencing so much because it was becoming a bit of a bother. And in George Kellerly, after fencing for 27 years in Strasbourg, he's the most prolific fencing master in Strasbourg history. He held over 80 fecht school over the years. Meyer held like 6. He was huge. And after 27 years, he's trying to make rent, scraping by. Anders Nenninger pawned his swords because he wasn't fencing enough. Like no one was getting rich. Just like today, it's a passion. Most fencing events are just trying to break even. They're holding these for the joy of it and for the community. They're not going, all right, we're going to come out ahead, 30 grand. No, it's if you come up even in fencing, like this event's going to be like, fuck yeah, we can do it again next year because it's always even. Like it's the sort of thing that is pretty relatable to today. The one exception might be Hans Baumgartner. This guy is a Messerschmitt of Basel. He's about Meyer's age. He's the same profession as him, the same age as Meyer. And there's this record in one of the Basel books where it says that he is given the school and the social position of fencing master. This is pretty rare. There's a bajillion records in Strasbourg that I've reviewed, and no one gets called the fencing master of Strasbourg. There's multiple that overlap. There's just people that do it. No one is given a social position except for Hans in 1558. And this makes me think, This is around the time when Meyer would have traveled to Strasbourg, and he would have been there maybe as a journeyman or working towards getting citizenship. He got citizenship in Strasbourg in 1560, 2 years or a year and a half after this. This is in December, just over a year, which makes me wonder, did Hans get the job of fencing master in Meyer's hometown and have Meyer have to move out? If there was a singular job of the head dude in this city, would Meyer have to move to maybe find greener pastures? This is an open piece of research. This book is not digitized. We found this letter separately, and there's a bunch of citations for it where we got the transcription. But we're going to do some digging around this note and look back to see if maybe there's applications for people trying to get this job before he ended up getting it. So big mystery, but this could be hypothetical, the thing that like killed Meyer. If he was forced to move to Strasbourg instead of staying in his hometown and scrape by and do things, and then because he moved, get a job in Mecklenburg, all these things, this is a pretty pivotal event of did you get the job or no, to have to switch cities and environments. So it could be pretty fun if we could find more. Fingers and toes, as I say, we'll find out. But Weigenbrack is even more interesting. He shows up in the council records almost 80 times across his years. Meyer, I think, has 8 appearances, 8 or 9. And the reason why is because he had a ton of jobs that related to city government. He was a Night's Watch captain. He worked as a council messenger. After he was fencing too much, they gave him a desk job so he could just ferry letters around instead of having to be a tailor. And because of this, and because he was a bit of a dick, he shows up a lot. For example, his Night's Watch job is that short because he got fired. There's a note in 1567 that says, hey, the Night's Watch, keep it like this. They're drinking, they're working their day jobs and sleeping through their shifts. And Weigenbrack specifically runs into the students at night and they say, hey, fencing master, where are we meeting tomorrow? And he goes, get out of here. So he just like lets people go that are breaking curfew. And there's a specific regulation from the year before that says, don't do that. Like the most cut and dry, if you find students in the alleyways, don't let them go. And then he goes, And so this is one of the things that kind of shows off that fencing masters and folks, they had complexities in their daily lives. If you ever heard of like fencing masters, somebody coming by and like, oh no, you can have like a month off your dues. He was trying to be chill with his students because he's the super cool fencing master. He's probably in his mid-20s by now. And he's like, oh yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. And then you lose your job. Not so great. And we only have one work-related record for Meyer. It's this one from 5070. This is him. This is him marked as the treasurer for the Smiths Guild in Strasbourg. And so by this time, he had been he was probably doing well with the Messersmiths and the Cutlers and the Smiths Guild in general to get this job. He doesn't show up in the records about his job ever, except for this record. So a little bit more low-key. Meyer in general doesn't tend to stir the pot. Pretty quiet, other than requesting some fecht schools and things. But this wasn't enough for me, so I wanted to dig in more about their jobs. And we're going to see someone else who has a lot about their career as we think about your dad. I really like that you brought up that you had a family and a father, because the same was true here. Again, we think of singular fencing masters, and we go, oh yeah, it's RDL, these folks, but they had kids and wives and family drama, and they had to deal with their siblings. Meyer's brother was a bit of a dick. We have these complexities and intricacies that happen, and fencers who had family members who also fenced with them, which is me as well. We also have extensive parish records, both in Basel and in Strasbourg. This is my own little data table where I keep track of everything. And I've gone through and found, I've probably looked at tens of thousands of parish records individually, but I've kept track of a few hundred. This is George Frieder. We're going to talk about him. We got Jackie and his marriage record. We got Weigenbrack's son, Weigenbrack Jr. All these folks are there for you to look at and see their lives kind of playing out of them being married and having kids. But the most prolific one of all is George Frieder. This is, I think, the most extensively documented family of a fencing master in history. Not to toot my own horn, but hey, most of it doesn't matter. But it's kind of fun to be like, yeah, this is the one. This is a QR code to his family tree. If you want to look at it, it's him, cousins, his grandkids. He's a godparent for a bunch of folks. It's dozens and dozens of records. He shows up in the Hans Metal Fecht book, the Hans Metal that you just heard from if you were here for Chidester's one. He shows up as a Marksbruder, and he has a quadrillion family members. He actually eventually marries into a pretty big family in Strasbourg who are like mayors and big time folks. But he's an interesting case of family and work showing up at once. He shows up as in the Hans Metal Fecht book, it's keeping track of Marksbruder being said as Masters of the Longsword, kind of the most official high title of a Marksbruder. And then he has his last fencing event that exact same fall. So it might be like someone who gets top 5 in longsword and goes, sweet, I'm done. And they retire from HEMA ratings, that kind of thing, like nailed it. And they kind of bring it back. But he also gets a new job in the armory the next year and as a tower guard the next year. And then he takes over his family business as brickmakers and kind of keeps going with that for decades. And it seems like he started having more kids, needed to make rent better, and kind of went, all right, I'm going to put down the sword and start to do more for my family and my family's business and things like this. And if you've ever known someone like that, who shows up, they fence for a while, they get a new job, they have a kid, and they go, all right, done, and they leave HEMA. I've known tons of folks. It's really common nowadays. Same thing there. His family tree is complex. And if you look at it, there's some trends and things that you can see. And notice anything odd or that jumps out to you about this image. It's got stars on it. Got George on the top and the star, and Bernhard with a star. Well, one key thing that I saw over and over and over again is you can see some family tragedy happening in the records. It was common practice where if a child died, you would keep that name and name another kid the same thing. So I would look through the parish records and see, cool, George Frieder, baptized in 1557, sweet. And then scroll down through the table, go, George Frieder, oh, fuck. Because I knew that meant that the first one died as an infant, and now here's George too. And that would happen over and over and over again. And sometimes I'd be researching this guy and go, just see it over and over again. Here's Apollonia Rule, not Apollonia, but like John Smith, then John Smith, I go, oh, fuck. And then like 2 years later, John Smith, I go, oh, and just get so down in the dumps and sad. And it's the olden days, it was really, really common. But it was one of those parts of research where it like hit me pretty hard, kind of going like, fuck. Like some families had like multiple kids die over and over and over again. And it was like one of those pieces where I'd kind of get deep in it and go, oh, I'm going to take a break. This is a lot. But we have some folks, Bernhard Frieder number 2, killing it, survived, ended up taking on his dad's trade as a brickmaker and kept the family business going into the early 1600s. He shows up a ton in the tax records trying to advocate for the guilds and the brickmakers to like get lower taxes and better transportation fees. It's all dumb stuff, not related to fencing at all. But you can see like this is the son of a Marksbruder being an integral part of his career and things. So a lot of these records that go from, oh, here's someone born into here's them carrying on the history of one of the people who we find. And I stopped at his grandkids, like Klaus and Felicitas, but you could keep going. This is probably one of the families that you can find still in Strasbourg today. They had so many of them that there's probably some Frieders still kicking about. It'd take a while to dig through, but they're probably around. One of the more fun stories is that of Simon Eckhart. He was a journeyman furrier, and what's fun about him is we can actually trace him on his waltz. As he was a young pup leaving his hometown, he was from Silesia, which is a region, Eastern German by Czechia and Slovakia, that kind of area there. He shows up in Freiburg just to the east of Strasbourg in 1570, then pops into Strasbourg the next year in 1571. And he's actually traveling with a friend, a guy named George Son, also a furrier, also from Silesia. And they're like just popping in between, fencing along their way, probably hung out with a person there. There's George right there. They're probably just fencing, learning their trades, going from city to city. And then he ends up in Strasbourg and he falls in love. When he shows up in Strasbourg, he starts working for Hans Wuschel. He was a local furrier master, one of the people who would take in apprentices and teach them their trade. This is a bit of a word salad, but I tried to highlight some bits. He falls in love with this guy's stepdaughter, Ottilia. However, Martin Steg, who was her guardian, when you were born, you'd have godparents and guardians called Vogt. And as you would, if your dad died, then there would have to be a male who would like take over care of you. And when someone would get remarried, oftentimes that guardianship would still stay. It wouldn't transfer to the stepfather. It would still remain separate. So you have like a godparent who's the guardian and the stepfather. They'd be separated. But we have a little bit like this. People know that fencing masters, pieces of shit, they love to spend their money. And she has a big old inheritance. So they're worried that he's going to take it and run. Pretty big concern. A couple days later, on the 12th of May, the stepfather comes by and he says, hey, we're still trying to make them not be allowed to get married. We want the council to get involved. This young guy is trying to seduce my stepdaughter. However, the council's actually looked into it, and it turns out that their journeyman is born legitimately. He's a pretty stand-up guy, no problems at all. And the stepfather is a piece of shit. He's a slovenly fellow who keeps an evil household. Turns out they're not the greatest dudes in the world. Yes, sir.
Quick context check. Do you have a sense of the population of the town at this point?
Oh, God. I've looked it up before. I don't remember. It's in the tens of thousands, like 10 to 20,000, I think. It's not massive.
That's big enough that you might not know your neighbors, though. You know your neighbors.
You probably know your neighbors in your small section, but somebody across the other town you might not know. But your guild in your neighborhood, you'd know your neighborhood really, really well. We'll talk about neighborhood in just a little bit. But yeah, the closer you are, you have like these pockets of you know everybody in the circle, and then the other side you might not know somebody. But this made me wonder, were they actually trying to look out for her? Or, if he's a piece of shit, slovenly household, she had a 250 guilder inheritance. George Frieder, who we just talked about, he left for his kids after a lifetime of work 300 guilders. So 250, that's like a lifetime's worth of savings. Or were they trying to keep the inheritance? Yes, sir.
What sort of context have you seen in other proximate records about the use of evil household? Is that a Protestant Catholic thing? Is there something else?
It's a bit of a Protestant thing. These were all people of the Reformation had already hit. They were largely Calvinists and Lutherans who were hanging out inside of Strasbourg and in Basel. They were both really, really tied into the Reformation. Some of the big council members during this time like talked to Luther and Calvin via letters. Like it was really, really close. This terminology about evil slovenly households is pretty common. It usually means that they're dirty, unkempt, probably like there's records of people who were abusive to their wives. And when they heard about it, the council would like get them in trouble. You weren't allowed to like, there wasn't that idea of like, oh, your wife is property, you can do whatever, was not the case. If you brought it to the council, they'd be like, no. And they would talk about they're evil or slovenly as in they were mean and would like hit their family members and were pieces of garbage. So this language of slovenly and evil comes up pretty often when someone's just a deadbeat piece of crap. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that part of the plus side that he was born legitimate. Would they check the records?
Yeah, they would send letters back and things, and people were pretty quick about sending letters. They had a pretty good system. There's like postmasters and folks, and they were pretty highly connected. But oftentimes they would just check with other folks who knew guild members, who knew people, and would ask about it. And they'd be like, cool, were you like actually baptized and things? And to double check to make sure they weren't like, there were hospitals for like unmarried people. And that's the main thing they would want to make sure is that you actually had a mom and dad who were married and things and were legitimate. And that was still a big deal. But luckily, got a happy ending. This is their marriage record, if you want to look at it, the actual one. This is a scan of them tying the knot the next month. So in May, all this stuff around, like they're so evil, he's going to take all of his money. And the council goes, nah, screw it. This guy's nice. They're young folks. They're in love. And they get married in June. He gets his citizenship through her. So he becomes a citizen. He works in the Furriers Guild. He has 5 kids that I could find locally. The godparents to those kids are also people who are big names in the Furrier Guild, including folks who are her step siblings, Attilia's step siblings. Godparents are also her godparents for her kids. So apparently Simon was a pretty kick-ass dude. The big folks in the guild were like, yeah, we'll be your godparents. So seems like the stepfather folks were dead wrong. I actually found some notes recently, last week, before this, where they're asking about inheritance and trying to get it moving. So I think they were trying to secure all of her money for them, and they didn't want to have it marry out because there was a lot of money on the line. So yeah, they were total pieces of shit. So happy ending, kids, all the things. They eventually moved to Bar in France in 1583. So they move away from the city. He asked if he could keep his citizenship here in case they want to come back, and so pretty nice. Except not. In 1592, they show up again. Ottilie has died. Simon's terminally ill. We don't know with what, but he just says that he's fucked. And he's basically coming to drop off his kids in the poorhouse, in the city where they still have family, and Attilia's family's still there, and he still has citizenship, and they're trying to just kind of get them somewhere to be taken care of before he croaks too. So it's a sad ending. When I found this one and translated it, I was just like, I got to write another article and make people sad. But this is some of these complexities that you can get when you dig in. This guy fences Simon Eckhart in Strasbourg for like 5 years and requests Fecht School along with Weigen Brack and George Kellerly and all these folks, and probably hung out with them and knew them, and then moved away with his family, and then this happens. And this is hopefully less common today, but you might know someone who's had something as heavy as this happen. And outside of the whole stereotype of like, oh yeah, Meyer got a cold and croaked, and that sort of thing of a fencing master dying, like this adds a little bit more weight and story to how these things really did happen back then. But it's a pretty cool tale, and it's something that we can think about and be like, pour one out for Simon Ottilia. They made it, and then the world hit them. But on a lighter note, we also have a lot of records of people's brothers fencing with them. This is me and my brother Callum. He's 6'6". And when I think that I'm really good at fencing and I got my thrust range right, he's like, no, and hits me in the face every single time. It's great. Oh, God. George Kellerly, his brother, visits for a few years and fences with him. The Grassman family, really annoying. Their dad named all of his sons Hans blank Grossman. So there's Hans Bartholomew Grossman, Hans Valentine Grossman, Hans George Grossman. Like, come on, man. Even the council records are wrong sometimes. It says Hans Grossman in the index, and there's a little caret mark, and it says Bartel in between because they wrote it down wrong. Like, they confused everybody. And they fenced for a long time. There's some really good records about them. And Joachim Meyer's brother even comes and visits in 1564. I think this is the year that their dad died, the very end of 1563, beginning of 1564. There was a big plague that came through both Strasbourg and Basel at the time, and a bunch of folks in Meyer's old neighborhood in Basel die. And I have records of them croaking around the same time. And their property record that we'll look at in a second says that his heirs start paying the rent then. Yes,
Is
sir.
this the older brother who did not have the most stellar reputation?
Younger brother with the non-stellar reputation. Yeah. But he was also a Messerschmitt, also a fencer, grew up in the same neighborhoods. So if you have a sibling, anybody have your siblings who also fence? Oh, I got the worst little sample size in the world where it's just me. But sometimes we'll have a crew where there's like a few folks. But yeah, there's a lot of family fencing that was happening as well. Just bad luck that we didn't get more records about him. This is the only record I have of Hans Jacob Meyer, who's Joachim's brother, doing it. And Meyer's family was actually pretty big. He was one of 13 children, 2 of who died in infancy. It was Esther, and then Esther 3 made it. Good job. 2 of them died in the same year in 1571, Joachim himself and his younger brother George. That's how I actually figured all this stuff out, is I called it the smoking gun record, where it says his mom's name and his brother and him all in the same note to kind of tie them all together. And the main way that we'd know it is that they're all in the same parish. They have his dad's job title, because profession, profession, profession. There's no overlap in dates, and there's an index that was written at the same time that has all of them noted here. This one is Joachim Meyer on page 11. These are his siblings. The ones in bold are those who actually have records about that I've found so far. Joachim, of course, Hans Jacob. He shows up in Basel and that one note in Strasbourg. Esther shows up a couple times after her dad's died. She gets her guardianship taken over by someone else, one of the godparents of the Meyer family named Hans Thuring. And then George Meyer shows up in the same note that talks about Meyer's death at the end of 1571. One of my big hypotheses here is that the note for her coming back into Basel and getting her guardianship taken over by a godparent is that like 2 days before the note about Meyer's death, and kind of it's his mom trying to figure out inheritance stuff because his brother has died as well. My hypothesis is that I think that Esther and his brother George might have gone to go live with him up in Strasbourg while he was there. I've got no evidence of it yet, but the fact that he croaks and then both of his siblings show up in Basel again, with one of them also dying, maybe Meyer coughed on him, I don't know, around the same time, it's the timings are just too close to be like, oh, I wonder why. So I think that the note, there's a famous note of Meyer's death that says Joachim Meyer's widow and child, and then the note doesn't mention a child. I think it might have been his sister living with them, and the scribe wrote that down and went, oh, his sister, okay, and then didn't mention it again. Hypothesis, no evidence, but a pretty fun one. In short, they had complex family lives, just as we do. If anybody got a text today and went, from like a dad or a mom or something like that, like they had the same things going on. There's records about people getting in trouble and people getting mad at each other and families fighting and suing each other. There's a lot going on, in short. But they also needed places to live. Housing is something that oftentimes brings us into history a little bit, insofar as it's a physical thing that we can see. All of these stories are kind of immaterial and written on paper, and you can kind of imagine what's happening, but going to a place is different for all of us. Have anyone gone to like a historical site like the Colosseum or somewhere and just stood in the place and gone like, they did this here, and it hits a little bit different? Yeah, so having actual places to go to might hook a little bit different in that kind of history brain. One of the fun ones is Meyer's old hood. This is the St. Alban neighborhood. Vorstadt is neighborhood. This was the land of papermakers and Messerschmitts and bookbinders and all of those trades in this one neighborhood. We can see here on the right, we've got a couple of canals with water wheels, like those ones there. These are the old paper mills. They're still there. This is one of the big ones. It's original. You can go there and see it and touch the old beams, and it's a museum that you can walk through and see. Yes, sir.
In this context, like, are the students there because they're doing all the shears and stuff?
Moreover, because they had the infrastructure for the water wheels, there are a bunch of creeks that ran through that they did a lot of stuff on to kind of get the infrastructure there. That's the main reason why. But it wasn't only there. Messerschmitts show up all along the Rhine as well. It wasn't exclusive here. But papermaking was. This is like these.
Why are they both because one is sort of the other?
Yeah. But it was mainly papermakers, and then Messerschmitts were spread out a little bit more than just here. Annoyingly, I've not been able to find where Hans Baumgartner lives. That would have been a cool one, but he might have just rented forever, and I didn't write it down. But anyway. But you can go here. All of the buildings for the papermaking museum are original, 14 and 1500 built. A lot of the family godparents, this is George Durr's paper mill. He was the godparent to George Meyer, who croaked. And you can go next to it to Hans Thuring's mill, who became the guardian of Esther Meyer after she came back to the city, and was his first wife was godparent to a bunch of the other ones. His mill's next door. So all of the Meyer family godparents, they were all mill owners. You can go to all of their mills still, which is pretty cool. And we have records for Meyer's own family. These are 2 property sale records from 1558 selling property to Jacob Meyer, his dad, and Anna Freund, his mom. These are originals. These are from the Strasbourg archives. You can see it's Gereichsarchiv B33 is the record. I've got these all digitized and open source. If you want to dig in, they're all available freely. Yes, sir.
What is the significance of the like sine wave line over top of the document?
It's a strike through. It could, I don't know the context of why these ones were struck through. It could be done either for revision, if they wanted to revise something and then like rewrite it somewhere else. Those ones are usually really scribbly. There are some where it might just be the scribe marking it as done, or cool, we've reviewed it and things. It really depends. I don't know why these ones are struck through the way that they are. But some of them are really obviously like scratched out and then they write things next to it. These ones are just kind of struck. So it might be either that when these contracts were done, maybe they got nulled that way. I don't know. And this is their house, 47 St. Alban Vorstadt. This is the church where Meyer was baptized. These are the paper mills, and he's right down the street. The property sale record says that it's right by the fountain and the linden trees. And then I found some other records that actually tie it down to this exact property. It says between Peter Gutmann, the wine grower, and Peter Stalker, the cooper. Found both of their houses, and it's right there. What's nice about Basel as well is that it's in Switzerland. And I don't know if you guys are history buffs. The last 200 years, what did Switzerland do a lot of?
Not go to war.
Yeah, Strasbourg was on the border of Germany and France. And if you're on the border of Germany and France in the last 200 years, stuff goes boom a lot. So there's a little bit of Swiss neutrality here. You can go to this neighborhood and these buildings, originals, 1500s. There's a guild house right down here. It's this building called Zum Hohen Dolder that was used as a guild house back then. You can go in and see it. There's some swords hanging on the walls there. There's these all the old families have their crests along the top. So all original. You can go to the place, except for theirs, it's gone.
Except for what?
Except for Meyer's family. Toast. The Gutmanns, still there. Original, 1500s. The Talachers, also paper makers and mill owners. Gone, still there. But him and his neighbor's house, toast. The only ones. This is the Google Maps view of it today. And it's literally like they built a house and they have it on a setback. So it's like original, setback house, not there. Original. And it's just one of those quirks of history where like out of all the places, the one thing that matters to our weird niche group of nerds is this one, and that's the one that's gone. Like, really? Oh, well. Strasbourg is also even worse. We have locations for a lot of these folks of where they lived. This is an old 1550s bird's eye view depiction of the city. This is the cathedral, and you can see that the steeple's not there because the guy was literally up in the steeple and drawing it out as a bird's eye view, which is why the perspective looks like a fisheye. It's kind of fun. And this is where they all lived. This is where Meyer's widow ended up after she married again, right down here. George Callerly and Wolf Brand, another fencing master and carpenter, ended up over there. All of these are not original anymore. They all got blown up or demolished or changed. Only the churches have some originality to them. And even some of those, like Temple Neuf, got exploded. This is the worst one. It was being used as an archive and library at the time and lost 300,000 books and documents. I think it's pretty safe to say like he would probably be different if that didn't happen, because there's probably stuff that got left from these two there and it's toast. That makes me really sad. Prussians blew it up. Anyway. Wagenbrack, the guy we talked about earlier, he also owned a Gadlin, a little shop front, here in the courtyard there. The courtyard still exists, so you can go there and spin around and look at it. It doesn't look the same as it did back then, but you could be like, oh, he was literally here working and selling things, and he owned rent. It probably was, but it's at a record where he had stopped tailoring, so he might have just owned it and rented it out. There's a big property dispute about it where somebody claimed he didn't own it, and it like was right before he died, so it might have stressed him out. He literally gets done with this whole lawsuit and goes, I'm going to ask for permission off from my job to go to the spa. And they're like, cool, go. outside of housing and things, we've got extra drama to talk about. Does anybody have the time currently?
It is 1:47.
Okay, cool. We're good. This is something that hopefully is less common for our experiences, but we're talking about stories of people. And Meyer's boring. Straight up. He shows up, gets married, gets citizenship, fences like 4 times, writes some books, and then dies. He doesn't have fun stuff like this. His dad does, though. He shows up a few times. He gets fined for mischief. He and his friends, when he was a journeyman, got blackout drunk, went to a neighborhood, were screaming. One of his friends was slashing the ground with his sword and creating sparks. It was this whole thing that folks would do back then as like an intimidation thing. Robin Swords made a video on it and cited me. And you can see these guys, you get in trouble about doing this shit. It was like, no go, don't pull your sword out and act like a dick. He also gets fined for missing watch. Like earlier we talked about why folks fenced. You had to own arms and armor, and you had to do things for your city, like be on city watch, be part of the militias. Being a Night's Watch captain was a little bit extra. But this was a pretty big deal. And Meyer was 9 years old. No, he was 7. He was 12 when this happened. Yes, sir.
Do you have a sense of what portion of the people in the city were actual citizens and had these obligations?
No, I don't know the ratio. Most folks who were craftsmen were. There were, they called them like non-citizen residents who were around. Hans Baumgartner, the reason why he had that job. Yes, lots of journeymen, lots of folks that were kind of helping out. But if you were an actual guild member, you tended to be a citizen. Hans Baumgartner's dad was a non-citizen resident, and that's why him getting the position as social position of Fechtmeister was big, because they gave him citizenship along with it. So he went from a non-citizen. His dad just worked in one of the guild houses as like the tavern keeper, and then he got citizenship and a social position. So pretty big deal. But I don't know that. It's a good thing to look into because I'm curious now and I want to find out. I also found a record recently that I'm digging into in this Kunstschaffenbucher where it looks like Meyer's dad might have been a bit of a philanderer. It says that he promised himself in marriage to someone, and then she's like suing him. So he might have been like, hey, baby, yeah, I'll totally marry you, to kind of get a little bit of something on the side. And it was like, bye, which they were not cool with. So I'm still looking into that record, so I didn't include it here. But I wrote a little mini article on it. This is a map of the city at the time, if you want to look at it. The place that he was supposed to be keeping watch was called the St. Alban Tower, or the St. Alban Tor. In this map, it's on the top left of it. And I want to see if you can find it before we go to the next slide. But people who lived in this time were expected to have this in their house. Usually this kind of armor, chest with arms and then a helmet. Usually some kind of arms like a halberd and sword that folks would wear. You had to do it. This was a common outfit of a Night's Watchman. He's got this armor on, but he's got a jacket over the top. You can see his legs are unarmored. He's got a sidearm and a pole. They would have boar spears, Nebelspies, with the little lugs on it. There's actually a depiction of them fighting students, the Night's Watchmen against students, and they're just having a brawl, and they have these boar spears with the lugs on the end. But this was a requirement of folks having this. Anybody find the St. Alban Tor? You got it? It's highlighted in red towards the top left. Yeah. But yeah, this is the actual record of him being in trouble for doing it. He got thrown in jail. Meyer was 11 when this happened, so he would have remembered it, of his dad going, getting in watch, and getting in trouble. His brother also shows up a bunch. Like Zach was saying about his younger brother, who's a bit of a dick. This is him. He has a conflict with a gun maker. This guy, George Bryson. George Bryson, also a piece of shit. I found him in the records a ton. He's a complete asshole. They threatened to execute him at one point. It was bad. But he also said, cool, he pursued officials about, he wanted to repay a debt, and he said, fuck you, and went after them with a knife. He also said that he was going to stab somebody. This is Meyer's brother. And like, get out, I'll kill you. And worst of all, he got called to arms. When there's a fire, people who are part of the watch would have to get suited up and go to keep crowds away, to keep looting away while the fire department actually worked. And he showed up without armor and he goes, yeah, I've got it at home, it's fine. And they went back to check on him and he didn't have any armor, which is a bad thing for back then. So he got in trouble and they said that, cool, he'll be up to his neck in something if he doesn't change his ways. So, yes, sir.
Oh, just there's the slovenly household again.
Yeah, slovenly household. So this was a common thing that folks talked about. And this is one of the reasons why I think maybe they would have sent Joachim Meyer's siblings to go and live with him instead of this older brother who was still in town, because of this stuff. Like, send Esther and George to live with Joachim in Strasbourg because Hans Jacob is like a bit wildin'. If we take a humanizing approach, the first record is in 1564, after he goes and fences with Meyer, then comes back. This is around the time when his dad died. And so a lot of this might be something from that. Your dad dies of the plague. You're now the oldest son in the city, all of a sudden having to deal with shit. This might just be someone going like, oh, fuck. Like, what do I do? I'm going to drink, get mad, miss out on watch, threaten people, sell my armor. This could be a vision of someone whose life was just sad then because of family dying. If we want to look at it in a more humanizing approach instead of, hey, what a dick. But there's a little two sides to the same coin. There's more I want to find about him. He had a few siblings. He had a few kids as well who I haven't been able to trace. But he's a pretty interesting figure. Hans Baumgartner as well. Massive piece of shit. Unadulterated piece of garbage. He gets in trouble a lot after the late 1560s. He is the fencing master of Basel, the guy who might have kicked Meyer out of a job. He shows up in 1570 while Meyer was still alive, saying that they visited him, saying that he's got to work industriously and raise your children. He avoids evil company and keeps a proper household. He was basically like neglecting his family, not working very hard, probably just fencing. And this is the start of his kind of run-ins with the law. He'd been fencing master for 12 years at this point in Basel. In 1571, there's this record that shows up at the very beginning of 1572 in Basel, where it says, ooh, something happened at Freiburg. He associates with evil company. If he doesn't pay attention to his household, we're going to expel him from the city. Much more serious. He shows up in Freiburg across 3 years to fence, 1569, 70, and 71. This is one of the indexes about him. Hans Baumgartner von Basel, ein Fechtmeister, ist Fechtschule zu halten abgeschlagen. This is him. They said no. That means no Fecht school. Yes, sir.
I noticed it says expelled from the city and country. Do they really have the authority to kick him out of
Country means more like the general area. So the city itself and the surrounding areas, meaning like, don't just go out the city walls and hang out, like you got to get out, is basically that. Basel they called them like the marker stones, where they kind of put the borders of their physical territory outside the city walls as well. What he did in Freiburg, though, was this. He hung out at a brothel called the Split Rose, which is a great name for a brothel. Hilarious. He basically went and bought one of the prostitutes like bread and wine and like took her outside and like wandered around with her and like fooled around like outside of the brothel. And he got thrown in jail for it. And so did she for running it. And this was something where in like Reformation Calvinist times, hard no. Big deal to like leave your family and go and hang out with prostitutes in a different city. He gets released later on. He says, please give me some of this clemency. It's fine in November. He pays his fines and things. Yes, sir.
For context, like about how much money is like 10 pounds?
Pretty big. It's really hard to do conversions.
I know.
But this is not insignificant. This is a few months' wages total. Okay. So it's a lot of money. Some of them, like in Strasbourg, when you missed watch, it's like you get fined 1 pound, 2 pounds, something like that. So 10 is pretty significant for this one. He stays in the city though, and he keeps trying to like do fencing there. He's not going home. He's not going back to answer for what he's doing. He's still hanging out. And he asks like, hey, no, I'm teaching 41 pupils. Can I stay and keep fencing? And they say, no, go home. Go back to your wife and children at Basel. Stop it. He's hanging out with prostitutes, neglecting home, doesn't want to go back. There's something going on with Hans where he's really, really, really skating that line of neglecting folks. And they end up kicking him and his family out. Like, it gets to the point where they say, cool, he must immediately remove himself from the city and country of Basel with his family and get out. And they would execute people. Like, there are some that say under penalty of the sword. Like, we will execute you if you come back or mess around. So this was pretty serious. He broke a lot of social norms and laws about this kind of thing. And this is the kind of thing that I look at in that historical like lens of the what ifs of like, cool, they gave him the social position of fencing master. Going back to that old thing of did Meyer get the job taken from him? The person they picked ended up getting kicked out of the city like a year after Meyer died. If they hadn't have done it, Meyer was boring. He didn't do anything. If he got the job instead, your mind starts to go, going, oh, fuck, if only that one person would have gone, now let's give Meyer the job. And then we might have had more from him, might have lived longer. It's a bit of a doozy. Again, hypothesis. But it's the kind of thing that once you get deep in the records and you start finding these webs, you start to go, ooh, and build some fun stories for yourself.
All my homies hate Hans Baumgartner.
Yeah, Hans Baumgartner, really interesting. Total piece of garbage. But these were their lives. They were diverse people. They had large families. They had careers that took over their fencing lives. They had kids, either small families or big ones with tragedy and drama in it. They got in trouble with the law for little tiny things and also really big stuff that got them canned. If they were here today in this room, they would probably be pretty similar to us, where you could be like, hey, how's your kid doing? And how's the job and working on things? And they'd be able to talk with you just as we talk to each other in that little beginning bit of, who are you? It's nice for me to think of the people back then swinging swords in this way, because I can then picture myself in their shoes, not as like a mystical swordsman, but as like, oh yeah, I'm an educator. George Kellerly's wife was the daughter of a schoolmaster. Cool. That's pretty simple. Like, I could probably chat with him about pedagogy. That seems pretty normal. And it makes me feel more like not mystical when I do it, but I'm like them. And they come here and go, oh, fuck, that's so sweet. Did you see that? Just as we do when we watch people fence too. But this is really fun. I love this kind of thing and learning more about the people and the places rather than just the fencing books. None of this will make you better at fencing, but it adds a little bit of extra flavor to what's going on. With that, any questions or things? Yes, sir.
So was the problem that he went to the brothel, or that he went with the brothel with the prostitute outside of the brothel?
A little column A, a little column B. Usually if you're inside, there's a little bit of like hush-hushness with it. Like the head of the brothel got in trouble too, just for like running it. So there's a lot of like inns would also be brothels kind of under the table, especially in Freiburg. But it was, if he had probably hadn't done that, they might have closed their eyes to it a little bit. But he
So
like,
it wasn't a legal brothel. It was a, we don't want to pretend like it's, we want to pretend like it's not your brothel.
yeah, and a lot of them were that. They weren't many legal brothels. It was a lot of that. Like, here's a split road. It's an inn, and they called them inns for the most part. But it was like, it's an inn that you go to. Yes, sir.
Back to hosting sexuals. It seems like a lot of people are attempting to use them as like their social safety net. I know a lot of guilds are big into having their own social safety nets for their members. Do we know if it was kind of like perceived as something like that, or if it was more just like rotated around outside of like the outliers that hosted like I did 60 or whatever?
I didn't see much evidence of that. It tended to be, there's a lot of folks who would just do them on the regular, and they didn't pop up very often. Like Wolf Brand, another carpenter and fencing master, he fences from like the mid 1550s until like the mid 1570s, but he does like one every 6 years. So he's not doing it as like a big income thing or anything. He's just doing it as like a pastime and running it. So I don't think there is a big distinction. It's mainly the folks who are like not quite making the rent, like Feigenbrack, who are trying to use it just to like pad their wallets. but there wasn't a big group of folks who were like trying to make tons of extra income. I mainly see that stuff of people going like, yeah, I need a little bit extra on the side. But the guild records are annoying to get into, but I don't have a lot of data there. And you had a question first?
Yeah. Did each city have its own form of currency, or is there sort of a national?
They each had their own prints, and they had their own mints and things that they had common currencies, but usually local treasuries would mint their own. And as you travel around, they start to change a little bit. So you see some called pounds, guilders, crowns that have roughly equivalent amounts, but they kind of, the further you go, they kind of do vary by region. But like Basel and Strasbourg, depending on the record, they'll use the same currency or different, depending. Next, then you say.
Sort of structural question. So there's a reference to this guy having students that is presumably meeting regularly in a non-festival context.
Yeah.
And then running the festival is just, you are running the Hema scorecard. You are.
Yeah, it's this.
Yes.
This is like Fecht School, and then
What it means to get to run it means that like you are taking attendance, you're keeping track of things, you get paid by it.
yeah, you're organizing it, you're taking the heads, you're kind of running the show. You're getting the stacks, and then you're getting the wine, a lot of that, and you're kind of keeping people safe. There's a lot of early on, they say like, you can run it, but no pipes and drums, make sure everything's orderly, 1 penny a head. And it's up to them to kind of keep. And then there was somewhere they held a Fecht School and it was a shit show. They're not allowed to do more. So there's a little bit of that if you're supposed to be the one in charge of keeping it in line.
So there's the record of the running of the events. Are there any ancillary records of this guy renting space to teach?
No. I think they, later on in the 16th century, they called them,
This hall.
yeah, they call it a Fechtboden. In the early 1600s, they start doing that, where they have a literal place. In like 1620 in Strasbourg, they start having a fencing hall. But before that, it was largely in guild houses and courtyards and like just common spaces. So they don't have any records of where.
There's no record of someone paying rent for just to have a space for it.
Correct.
Okay, it's all in spaces that you freely access.
Correct. And not until the early, like 1620, they start paying rent on the Fechtbodens.
And then is there any record of people paying to go to classes?
No, we have some records of how much people were paying fencing masters for private lessons in thalers, which was like a slightly larger currency, but not for any of the folks. We don't know how much Meyer charged or Brack charged or anybody like that. We just have some offhand records from some other folks of how much they paid for a nobleman to get educated. I have records of how much the actual swords cost, just 21 batzen, which is pretty cheap for 2 swords. So it was, the fencing swords were cheap. They weren't fancy, expensive things. Like you could get a steel Fechtschwert, they called it, for like pretty cheap. And the question there then, Zach?
How the currency? Was it fiat currency or was it just precious metals?
A little column A, a little column B. It depended. Some were silver and like stamped silver. Some were had like gold and like alloys and things. And I think the cheap ones were like copper, but it wasn't purely off of the coin value. A lot of them were done by weight. But I think
coin is a guarantee, a state guarantee that this is actually this much.
yeah, but they have like, there's lots of records from the Pfennigthurn, the penny tower in Strasbourg, where they're like setting values for stuff. So you can see them set values and their printings of these are what our coins are supposed to look like and how much the exchange rates are for back then. But there were, it wasn't like taking coins and like weighing. It was like they set values for things based on bits and pieces. But I'm not very good at the currency stuff because it changes so much. I kind of just don't bother with it. It's too hard to predict. Yes, sir.
The bits about Meyer's dad, Jacob Meyer.
Yeah, Jacob Meyer.
Like getting in trouble in his youth. Was the bit about like him getting in trouble for like trying to like seduce another? Like was that like while he was married?
No, this was when he was this is around the time when he got in trouble for drunkenly.
Okay, so it was back when he's still like.
He was single, ready to mingle. He was a journeyman, farting around with girls, trying to get a little bit of something on the side by saying, "Hey, you want to get married?" And then, yeah, the weird thing about that one. This is like deep research weirdo shit, but it says that the lady's name is Anna Komtur, and Komtur means commander, and it's usually a rank or job title given to someone. It's not a last name. I found no one else with the last name of Komtur in Strasbourg or Basel. No one. And so it might be Anna Freund. It might be Meyer's mom. And I wonder if the scribe messed up and she was like the daughter of someone who was a commander. So it might be Anna Freund, Hans the Comteur's daughter, and the scribe wrote Anna Comteur instead. Or the transcription got wrong, but there's a chance it's Meyer's mom. And it was him going like, hey, maybe we'll get married. And then they like shotgun wedding them a little bit. So not sure yet, but that's something pretty new. But he definitely was like going like, hey, baby, yeah, I'll marry you. And then bailed on her. But yeah, it's wild. His dad was also a weird dude. Yes, sir.
I have more of a comment. It's interesting.
Please.
In Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, a lot of like the people that go and compete in the fencing tournament in the game are like people in the city, like your tailors and butchers, and sometimes like the announcer at the tournament will announce their profession, as well as their name, like you're saying their profession. It's kind of the interesting parallel in the game.
Exact same thing.
Yeah,
it was a huge part of folks' identity. Was like what guild you're a part of.
Trip to Basel 1.
Yeah, no, that's my goal. I want to go there and I want to like actually get to the archives. There's so many things that I just haven't seen because they're not digitized.